The great question: imagine waking up one morning and discovering that everything you believed about progress was a mirage. The world outside your window hasn't stopped moving, cars still roar down the streets, screens still glow with endless streams of information, and skyscrapers still pierce the horizon, but there's a faint, unsettling feeling that something is rotting beneath the surface. You can't see it directly, but it's there, like a hairline crack running through it. The foundation of a house, invisible until the day it collapses. We tell ourselves that life has never been better. We have more technology, more access to information, more freedom of choice than any generation before us. But have you noticed, the more we advance, the more anxious, disconnected, and hollow people seem to become? We post about mindfulness while scrolling mindlessly. We speak of unity while polarizing into tribes. We talk about progress, but the air tastes heavier, the news grows darker, and deep down beneath the hashtags, beneath the statistics, there's a sense we're moving in the wrong direction. What if all this advancement is just motion without meaning? What if progress isn't a straight road forward, but a carousel one that spins faster and faster, giving the illusion of movement, while we're really going nowhere? Think about it. When was the last time you felt that society's great achievements brought you genuine peace? That all our supposed progress made you more connected to your neighbors, more rooted in your own soul? When was the last time that world felt whole? We measure progress in GDP, productivity, and technological breakthroughs. But can you measure meaning? Can you quantify wisdom, compassion, or inner peace? Can a nation be considered advanced if its people are drowning in loneliness, addiction, and quiet despair? Somewhere along the way, we began equating more with better, more speed, more options, more data, more noise. But as the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung warned, the outward expansion of civilization without inner growth creates a dangerous imbalance. We've built skyscrapers but neglected the foundations of the human spirit. We've conquered the skies but lost sight of the soul. And here lies the paradox. The faster we run toward the future, the more we seem to lose touch with the very things that make the future worth having. Picture a man sprinting through a desert, clutching a bucket full of water. He believes he's racing toward an oasis, but in his frantic speed, he doesn't notice the bucket has a hole. By the time he arrives, he's holding nothing but an empty container, and the oasis was a mirage all along. Isn't that what we're doing? Running, innovating, consuming, only to discover that the things we truly hunger for, connection, meaning, peace, are leaking out of our lives with every step. If progress is real, why do rates of depression, suicide, and burnout climb each year? Why do we feel more lost? In an age where the entire world fits in our pockets, why, with all our tools, have we become less capable of simply being present? Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what happens when a society forgets its why? What happens when all the how becomes an endless louder, shinier, while the deeper reason for moving forward dissolves into the background noise? This is the quiet tragedy of our age. We are obsessed with the image of progress while blind to the cost. We build bigger cities but weaker communities. We connect across continents but lose touch with our own families. We share our lives online but struggle to speak honestly face to face, and maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along. The real danger is not whether progress will stop, but whether it will keep accelerating in a direction that leaves us spiritually bankrupt. So here's the great question, one you may have never been taught to ask. What if the true measure of progress isn't in what we build, but in who we become? Because if we don't define progress by the health of our minds, the strength of our values, and the depth of our compassion, then what exactly are we progressing toward? And perhaps toward what end are we running so fast? The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots. The illusion of progress is seductive, because it hides in plain sight. It doesn't announce itself as a lie. It dresses in the language of innovation, achievement, and hope. It shows you gleaming skylines, sleek devices, and a stream of headlines declaring breakthroughs. It whispers, "Look how far we've come. Imagine where we'll be next." And you believe it because the alternative is far too unsettling, that perhaps we have mistaken activity for advancement, and novelty for growth. Carl Jung once warned that a civilization without balance between technological development and psychological maturity is doomed to collapse under its own weight. He called it the problem of collective shadow, the unacknowledged darkness of human nature that grows in proportion to our external power. The more tools we build, the more potential we have to heal, or to harm. And yet, we rarely stop to examine whether our inner selves are ready for the responsibilities our inventions demand. Think about how we treat technology, like a toy. not a mirror. We innovate first and ask questions later. Social media was born not out of a philosophical discussion on human connection, but from the thrill of possibility. It was launched into the world without deeply considering its effects on attention, empathy, or mental health. Only now, years later, do we begin to count the cost: rising polarization, shortened attention spans, and a generation struggling to define itself in the glare of constant comparison. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this coming over a century ago. In his critique of modernity, he warned that the loss of shared values, once anchored in religion, community, and tradition, would leave humanity adrift in a sea of relativism without a higher purpose. We would chase distractions, pleasures, and progress as substitutes for meaning. But such substitutes can never fully satisfy. They only deepen the void. Arthur Schopenhauer went further, suggesting that human life is driven by an insatiable will, an endless striving that creates suffering precisely because it can never be fulfilled. We seek the next invention, the next milestone, the next personal upgrade, believing that at some undefined point, we will arrive. But arrival is a myth. The wheel turns endlessly, and the satisfaction we expect at the end is always postponed, just beyond reach. Our culture reinforces this cycle through what psychology calls the hedonic treadmill, the tendency to quickly return to a baseline level of happiness despite major positive or negative events. Buy the latest phone, and within weeks, its novelty fades. Land your dream job, and in months, the daily grind returns. We're conditioned to believe that the next thing will bring lasting fulfillment. Yet our own minds betray us, resetting our emotional equilibrium so that we hunger again. This isn't just an individual problem, it's systemic. The modern economy thrives on discontent. Advertising isn't designed to make you feel satisfied, it's designed to ensure you don't. If you were truly content with what you had, the engine of consumption would grind to a halt, and so we're kept in a low-grade state of yearning, forever chasing an idealized future self that remains tantalizingly out of reach. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, envisioned a society where the illusion of progress was maintained through constant pleasure and distraction. People believed they were free because they were happy, never realizing their happiness was engineered to keep them docile. Replace Huxley's fictional drug Soma with our modern equivalent's endless streaming content, dopamine-charged notifications, on-demand entertainment, and his prophecy feels less like fiction and more like documentary. Jean-Paul Sartre might argue that this is the consequence of living in bad faith, refusing to confront the freedom and responsibility of shaping our own lives, instead surrendering to roles, scripts, and structures that society hands us. If we blindly accept the narrative of progress, we avoid the harder, more uncomfortable work of defining what progress means on our own terms. And yet, the problem runs even deeper. At its core is a fundamental psychological blind spot. We confuse external change with internal transformation. We think faster internet, cleaner energy, or a bigger house will make us fundamentally happier, wiser, or more at peace. But as Viktor Frankl observed, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Most of us avoid that challenge, the inner work facing our fears, confronting our contradictions. Healing our wounds feels slow and uncertain compared to the thrill of visible progress. A new gadget can be bought in seconds. Inner growth may take years. And so, we default to the easy path, chasing the next visible improvement, avoiding the invisible labor of self-knowledge. The result, a society that advances outwardly while stagnating inwardly. Like a tree with dazzling leaves but shallow roots, we are vulnerable to every storm. Our confidence in our progress blinds us to the fact that much of it is cosmetica, change in form, not in essence. And here's the most dangerous part. Once you're in the illusion, it's self-reinforcing. You see others racing ahead, and you fear being left behind. You double your pace, not realizing you're running in the same circle as everyone else. The carousel spins faster, and you mistake dizziness for destiny. If you've ever felt exhausted by the pace of modern life, yet guilty for wanting to slow down, if you've ever looked at the world's advances and wondered why they don't seem to make us kinder, calmer, or wiser, you've already glimpsed the hidden problem. But seeing the problem is not the same as understanding it. To understand it, we must follow its roots into the human psyche, into the quiet places where we decide, consciously or unconsciously, what truly matters. And the deeper we go, the more unsettling the realization becomes. The unseen consequences, the danger of the illusion of progress, isn't just that it deceives us, it's that it reshapes the very architecture of our lives while we remain unaware. You wake each day to a world filled with solutions to problems you didn't know existed. The market tells you that you're falling behind if you don't upgrade. Social media tells you that your life is less exciting than it could be. The news tells you that you live in an age of unprecedented advancement, and somewhere, deep inside, a voice you can't quite locate whispers, keep going, keep chasing, you're almost there, but almost where? One of the cruelest consequences of the illusion of progress is that it steals the present moment. It conditions you to live perpetually in the not yet, to measure your worth by how far you still have to go instead of by where you are. This turns life into a deferred promise, a string of tomorrows that never fully arrive. From a psychological perspective, this is a kind of self-imposed exile. Our nervous systems, wired for survival in the wild, are constantly stimulated by the novelty and speed of modern life. Dopamine spikes drive us forward, chasing rewards that fade the instant we receive them. Neurologically, we are stuck in a loop. Anticipation greater than reward, greater than letdown, greater than repeat. We mistake the rush of anticipation for fulfillment itself, but it is only ever a shadow of the real thing. Culturally, the illusion rewrites our values without our consent. We begin to prize efficiency over depth, convenience over craftsmanship, quantity over quality. A conversation that meanders, a task that unfolds slowly, a skill that takes years to master. These feel wrong because they don't match the pace of progress. We are subtly trained to see slowness as failure, patience as weakness, and stillness as laziness. Over time, this creates a form of existential malnutrition. We consume more information than any generation before us, but rarely give it time to digest. We connect with more people, but our connections are thinner. We achieve more tasks, but fewer of them truly matter. We become, in essence, overfed and undernourished, bloated with data, starving for wisdom. And then there is the collective cost. When a society measures its worth purely by economic growth, technological innovation, and material output, it can justify almost any harm in the name of advancement. Ancient forests can be destroyed for the sake of development. Entire communities can be displaced in the name of progress. Mental health crises can be normalized because, after all, the GDP is rising. Nietzsche warned about this kind of moral blindness, the tendency to worship the means speed, efficiency, expansion, while forgetting the ends human flourishing, ethical integrity, meaning. We convince ourselves that more is always better, faster is always better, newer is always better, without asking, better for what? Perhaps the most insidious consequence is how the illusion of progress changes our relationship to suffering. In a truly wise society, pain is seen as a teacher, something to be endured, examined, and learned from. But in our culture of constant upgrading, suffering is treated like a glitch to be patched, an inconvenience to be eliminated. The moment discomfort appears, we seek a hack, a shortcut, a quick-fix product to make it vanish. This avoidance robs us of resilience. Carl Jung spoke often about the necessity of confronting our shadow, the darker, more difficult aspects of ourselves. Yet the more we flee discomfort in search of instant relief, the less prepared we are to face the inevitable storms of life. When real crises come, loss, illness, betrayal, we find ourselves fragile, unprepared, hollow, worse. Still, the illusion of progress fuels comparison at a scale humanity has never faced before. In the past, you might have compared yourself to a handful of neighbors or colleagues. Now, you compare yourself to millions of people, curated through the lens of filters and highlight reels. You don't just feel pressure to improve, you feel pressure to improve faster than everyone else. And this is where the societal trap snaps shut. If you slow down, you risk being left behind. If you speed up, you risk burning out. And yet, everyone around you is running, so it must be right. Right. The reality is that the illusion thrives on this mutual delusion. We see each other striving and assume that the striving itself must have meaning. But as Kierkegaard wrote, the crowd is untruth. Just because many people are chasing the same thing does not make it real. Consider the paradox. We have more tools than ever to solve human suffering, yet rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness are climbing. We can communicate instantly across the globe, yet misunderstand each other more deeply than before. We can produce more food than the world needs, yet millions go hungry. If progress were truly what we think it is, shouldn't these contradictions be disappearing, not multiplying? Here's the quiet horror. The illusion has no natural endpoint. It doesn't matter how advanced we become, because the definition of progress keeps moving. There will always be a next update, a next milestone, a next problem to solve before you can rest. This isn't a flaw in the system, it is the system. And so, we find ourselves living in a strange kind of paradoxical decline, more powerful, yet less in control, more connected, yet more alone, more advanced, yet less wise. We are racing toward an undefined future without pausing to ask whether it's worth reaching. But perhaps the most dangerous consequence is this: the longer we live in the illusion, the more we lose the ability to imagine an alternative. We forget that progress could mean something other than speed, growth, and consumption. We forget that it could mean depth, stillness, and wisdom. And once imagination dies, change becomes almost impossible. Which leads to the question you may already be asking yourself: if the illusion is this strong, this entrenched, how does one break free? The answer isn't comfortable. It requires a rebellion not against technology or society alone, but against the unquestioned assumptions we've been carrying since birth. The rebellion, how to break free. Breaking free from the illusion of progress is not a single decision, but a lifelong act of rebellion. Not a rebellion with banners and slogans, one waged quietly, deep within the architecture of your mind. It begins when you stop running. Imagine for a moment stepping off the moving walkway that everyone else is frantically pacing upon. The instant you do, you feel the strange dissonance of stillness. People rush past you, their faces tight with urgency. They glance at you with pity, suspicion, even contempt. Why aren't you moving? Don't you know you'll be left behind? The first truth you must accept is this: breaking free will make you appear foolish in the eyes of those still trapped. Progressive in looks like regression to those obsessed with speed. To dismantle the illusion, you must first question the metrics. Society will measure you in money, titles, possessions, followers. But these are proximal shadows of a deeper value. Schopenhauer warned of this centuries ago, that people spend their lives chasing what they think will bring them happiness, only to realize, too late, that the pursuit itself has consumed them. So your rebellion begins with a shift in the scoreboard. Instead of asking, "How much did I achieve?" ask, "How much depth did I experience?" Instead of asking, "How far did I go?" ask, "How present was I where I already was?" Carl Jung would tell you that any genuine transformation begins with integration, confronting the parts of yourself you've been ignoring. The illusion of progress thrives by distracting you from this inner work. It convinces you to look out, upgrades, milestones, and applause, so you never have to face the silent, unsettling truth within. Breaking free means turning inward. It means meeting the parts of yourself you've abandoned, the fears you've been too busy to face, the grief you've numbed with constant motion, the dreams you've buried because they don't fit the narrative of success. It's here that you'll find your first weapon against the illusion: slowness. Slowness is an act of defiance in a culture of acceleration. When you take time to read deeply, to walk without a destination, to cook without rushing, you are training your nervous system to escape the tyranny of constant stimulation. You're telling yourself and the world that life is not a race, and worth is not measured in speed. The second weapon is selective disconnection. You cannot see clearly if you are constantly bombarded by the signals of the machine, the endless scroll, the breaking news, the algorithmic feeds. They are all part of the illusion's machinery, keeping you reactive instead of reflective. This doesn't mean abandoning technology altogether. It means using it as a tool rather than letting it use you. It means reclaiming your attention as the scarce and sacred resource it truly is. Nietzsche would call this self-overcoming, the act of transcending the values you've inherited and forging your own. It is not enough to reject the illusion. You must build a new definition of progress that is yours alone. For some that may mean mastering a craft with no commercial value, simply for the joy of creation. For others it might mean deepening relationships instead of expanding networks. For still others it could be dedicating themselves to a cause, not because it's profitable or prestigious, but because it's right. Here's the paradox. When you stop chasing the illusion, you often discover the very fulfillment you were chasing all along. But this fulfillment feels different. It's quieter, more enduring. It doesn't spike like dopamine. It settles into you like a deep breath you didn't know you were holding. Rebellion also requires community, not a crowd, but a circle. A few people who share your values, who remind you when you're slipping back into the old patterns. Sartre warned that we are condemned to freedom, that with no ultimate authority dictating our lives, we must choose our own path. But choice is easier when you're not walking it alone. Finally, to break free, you must be willing to embrace discomfort. Real progress is not painless. It requires facing truths you've avoided, shedding identities that once earned you approval, and risking the security of the familiar. The illusion of progress seduces you with the promise of comfort, The reality of true progress demands the opposite: resilience, courage, and the willingness to feel lost before you find your way. And yet there is a strange, exhilarating joy in this, the joy of no longer being bound to an invisible script, the joy of waking up and knowing that your day is not dictated by an algorithm or a market trend, but by the quiet compass inside you. Breaking free will not make you immune to the world's illusions. They will always try to pull you back in. But each time you resist, you strengthen a muscle the illusion cannot touch, the muscle of sovereignty. And this sovereignty is the seed of the final and most powerful realization, the one that renders the illusion powerless forever. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. There comes a moment, sometimes slowly, sometimes like a lightning strike, when you realize the most dangerous thing about the illusion of progress was never the illusion itself. It was the belief that your life was something you had to earn. From birth, you were conditioned to believe that your existence is a debt, that you must justify it by accumulating, by achieving, by becoming something more than you already are. This was the quiet, invisible hook on which the illusion hung its bait. You were never told the truth. You began whole. Imagine a child, playing in a field, lost in the pure joy of the game. The child is not thinking, I must play better than others. They are not tracking how much they've achieved in the last 10 minutes. They are simply being. That raw presence is the state we are born into before the machine teaches us to measure ourselves against impossible scales. The final truth is this: you do not need to move forward to be enough. Progress, as the world defines it, is a story written to keep you moving in circles that serve someone else's ends. But the most profound progress is not linear. It does not climb upward like a graph. It spirals inward, toward a deeper intimacy with your own being. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside, awakes." The ultimate freedom is awakening to the fact that life's meaning is not found out there in the trophies or milestones. It is here, in the depth with which you inhabit the moment you're already in. This realization does something radical. It collapses the entire premise of the race. The finish line was never real. The competition was never necessary. The prize was always in your pocket. It's at this point that the illusion loses its power, because you no longer play by its rules. You no longer measure your days by how far you've gone, but by how deeply you've lived. The irony is that once you embrace this, you often do create, achieve, and contribute more, but not because you're trying to keep up. You do it because you're aligned with your nature, and creation flows naturally from that alignment, like a tree bearing fruit, not because it's trying to improve, but because that is what healthy trees do. And with this shift comes a quiet courage. You are no longer seduced by every new metric the world invents. You don't rush to upgrade every time someone tells you you're falling behind. You can walk through the noise without being pulled into its rhythm. You begin to see how much of the modern world runs on the energy of the restless. Corporations, media, entire industries depend on you feeling insufficient. The moment you know you are already enough, you disrupt the economy of anxiety. You also begin to understand others differently. You see that most people are not your rivals, but fellow captives of the same illusion. You meet them with compassion rather than competition, and sometimes your quiet refusal to participate becomes a kind of invitation for them to question the race, too. But the deepest part of this realization is harder to articulate. It is not just about rejecting the illusion. It is about recognizing that life is not a means to an end. It is not preparation for some final reward, nor a series of checkpoints you must clear to earn the right to exist. Life is the field itself. Life is the play. And the measure of a life well lived is not how far you've gone from the starting line, but how deeply you have danced in the grass between here and there. Nietzsche once wrote, "What if a demon were to creep after you one night and say, 'This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more'? Would you throw yourself down and gnash your teeth, or would you say, 'You are a god and never have I heard anything more divine'? If the thought of living your life exactly as it is, again and again, fills you with dread, that is not a sign you need to chase more goals. It is a sign you need to change how you are living now. Because when you are no longer chasing progress, as defined by others, you can start living in a way you would gladly repeat forever. And here lies the paradoxical gift. By rejecting the illusion of progress, you discover a truer form of it, one that is not measured in miles but in meaning, one that is not about outrunning others, but about deepening into yourself. The world will keep shouting at you to run faster. It will keep dangling new carrots, inventing new ladders to climb. But once you've seen through it, you can smile not with arrogance, but with quiet understanding. You know that you're already where you're supposed to be. And so, The most powerful realization is not that the world is declining, or that the system is flawed, or even that the race is rigged. The most powerful realization is this: you can step off the track, right now, and still live a life more abundant, more authentic, and more free than any finish line could ever promise. Not tomorrow, not after you've done enough, not when you've earned it now, because the greatest progress you will ever make is the moment you finally understand. You are never behind,